Chapter 431. It's a good name. The elder called one of the trolls over to speak with Dominic, who had to try hard not to laugh at the eager trot the mountain of a troll jogged over at. He had a smile on his face like he had just won an award, and he eagerly shook Dominic's much smaller hand in both of his own. Wave mates, I'm glad to meet you. The other trolls told me that you were good. Do you have work? You have work, right? He asked. Indeed. I have work. I would like you and all your guard friends to come work for me at the manor. You can be my personal guards and help in the garden and play with the goats. Dominic agreed. The elder laughed quietly as the troll clapped. Dominic knew just how to handle the mountain trolls. They were a bit simple, but they loved nature and had an odd affinity for mountain goats, who shared their home territory. The trolls were vegetarian, so the goats were neither a threat nor a food source, and they often became friends. The troll was silent for a moment, making sure that he had understood Dominic's words properly before he answered. Are they good goats? He asked. Only the best. They grew up in the area, and they've got a blink cat watching over them so they don't get lost or injured. Dominic agreed. That did sound like a good bunch of goats to the troll. All right, we will work for you as long as we can stay near the goats. The troll agreed. I will alter the barracks so that it's better for trolls. It might be a bit small for 50, but I can make it bigger. That wasn't a big concern. The trolls were happy to sleep outdoors, or in a cave. Any building with a roof was a good building. Dominic turned his attention to the elders. Now, for the rest of you, how many farm families did you bring? How many shops will you need, and how many extended family compounds instead of individual houses? I have a list here somewhere. Did you have dedicated people for assigning houses? The elder asked, rummaging through his things. I have the Castellan record where everyone lives, so there are no questions about property disputes. If it's in the official record, that's what we will use to settle arguments, so be sure that it keeps updated. There is a mage sect in town and a school. We haven't made education mandatory, but it's an unspoken agreement that everyone will send the kids at least until it's time to start their apprenticeship. Dominic added. The elder nodded. We have school teachers with us as well. A husband and wife. I will send them to your school to talk about joining the staff. Are all your teachers from the mage sect? Dominic nodded, and the elder sighed. Then it will be good to hire them. The mages see a much different world than the weak children with very little magic. Some of our people could have been mages, but others can only use magitech devices. That's fine. If they can use magitech, they can keep up with the basics of daily life here. All the fireplaces and stoves are magitech, except some of the older farmhouses. But we do manufacture magitech fireplace inserts here, so if they want to upgrade a farmhouse that was still burning wood, they can. Anyone who cannot use magitech devices will have a hard time here, but that's rare, even among the purest of human lineages. I see that doesn't describe most of your people. Dominic explained. The elder nodded. There was an incident a few generations back. We don't really speak of it, but almost everyone in the village has some level of magical cat in their bloodline. That was not a phrase that Dominic had been expecting. Had a magical beast learned a transformation and went on a horny rampage? Or had someone been dabbling into the forbidden arts? Not that it truly mattered. If the bloodline was magical, they would have enough talent that they could work in the factories, or even join the Duskblade sect. Are we going to have an issue? The elder asked fearfully when Dominic didn't respond. No, not at all. I was just wondering what sort of cat it was, to estimate how powerful their magic might be. The mages always appreciate recruits, and Westover is a haven for mages. The more that we have, the better the services the duchy can offer the world. It might not seem like much to you now, but if they can become adventurers, medics, or techno-wizards, they have a bright future. Especially the troll-blooded, who have healing magic. There are never enough healers in a city. He explained. The old man smiled. Unfortunately, our trolls are not the sort to become medics and doctors, but we do have some priestesses. They have the trade skill cores for it, so they've got holy magic, like the paladins that we're told you have here. Dominic nodded. The royal guards are paladins, but in a large battle they're not enough, and they're needed for combat. But more importantly, on a regular day they have duties, and they're not available for healing services. If your people have the staff to set up a clinic, the townsfolk would appreciate it. So would our primary healer, a troll that lives outside of town. His wife is also a midwife with a little one of her own. So if you have need, you can send people to them. I think that a lot of your concerns will sort themselves out once you are settled into new homes. Some businesses are bound to overlap existing ones, but Westover is growing, and one of each is no longer enough. Speaking of which, I really need to have someone set up a second inn and tavern. I got all distracted with new magic and got behind on tracking city amenities. The old man laughed, and the troll chuckled, a rumbling noise like an idling truck. I get distracted too, especially around the cats. They're like goats, but won't let you pet them. The troll agreed. Dominic smiled at the big man. It's a never-ending challenge, my friend. Chapter 432. Split Up. The veiled maid came forward with a residential map of town and handed it to the elder. Have your people who are staying in town refer to this map before going looking for housing. The empty units are locked, but one of us or the sheriff can let you inside to look at them before you choose. 1,000 people at once is challenging, given our limited numbers, but if we bring in the head of household and only do a few dozen at a time, it will be manageable. For those who want to remain on the farm, all of the territory on this side of the river that isn't already being worked is fair game. Send out someone to scout it, and come back when you find one that you like. There are free portions on the other side of the river as well, but not the portion near the airships. That is dedicated to future development already. It will be treated as first come, first served. If someone else picked the farm you want, you must pick another. We are offering a full year without taxes to get your affairs in order, but if you wish to keep farmland, you have until the start of the rainy season next year to work it. I would suggest that you start soon and get the old crops replaced before the rains start this year. For businesses, you must report to one of us before you move your stuff into a shop. Some may have been reserved already by a craftsman who is waiting on renovations. But we don't let anyone hoard space they're not going to be using, and letting us know directly will settle property disputes much more easily. Now, who do you want to send first? The farmers can supervise themselves, and I will lead the group through town. Dominic nodded encouragingly, and the elder began to call names. These 20 are all business owners and represent over 150 of our members between their families. If you take them first, it will be best. The maid left with the first batch, while the second maid went to explain to the others what was going on. Dominic got to deal with the trolls. So, about the goats. We're ready to go meet the goats. Their representative announced. All right, we will go see the goats. Can I ask what your name is? I'm Commander Dave. And that's Lieutenant Dave and Shift Captain Dave and the Night Shift Daves. The troll listed, pointing to different trolls in turn. And you are? Dominic asked one of the few who was not mentioned. I am Larry. I cook the daytime meals. That is Larry who cooks the night shift meals, and over there is Ingrid, who doesn't think that Larry and Dave are the best names. Ingrid rolled her eyes. It's partially my fault that they've all got 2 brain cells both fighting for third place. But they're good guards. I blame my husband, rest his soul, for giving me a whole horde of morons to deal with. Dominic laughed at her blunt description. Are these all your brood then? Ingrid nodded. Each and every one of them. How do they all end up with the same names? Dominic asked. Blame my husband. He was the first Dave, and the elder you were speaking with is the first Larry. He taught them to cook. Ingrid explained. Well, that explains it then. Let's go meet the goats. They're friendly sorts, even if they didn't come from the mountains. To say that the politicians meeting in the courtyard were concerned by the arrival of 50 armed and armored mountain trolls was the understatement of the year. But the childish happiness that they displayed when the goats saw them and immediately charged made it impossible to stay frightened of the new residents. The 2 groups collided with each other, and the trolls picked up the goats to spin them in a joyful circle before putting them back down, confused and dizzy. Nobody else picked them up. That was not how this game worked. But it wasn't all bad. The goats liked the smell of mountain trolls, and the trolls were happy to go fetch fresh bales of hay for them. They even used a spell on the field to make it grow faster. Mountain trolls were turning out to be even better goat friends than the garden elf, and that wasn't easy. Jasmine watched in envy from the farrier stables as the trolls set up sleeping spots all around the hay field, while Dominic looked for an appropriate clear space to build them a barracks building. The existing one was made for human-sized guards, and the trolls were definitely not that. But they also liked to sleep in piles, so there would be very minimal need for furniture. He eventually decided to place them near the wall, as the defensive fortifications would feel most like home to them, with the tall rock walls at their backs. The trolls were highly impressed when they saw the new building and the massive stove that Dominic had installed, using a demo model of the Magitech fireplaces. Normally, cooking over the fireplace, instead of in front of it, was overkill. But for 50 large mountain trolls, it was barely sufficient. Alright, I have made you a space for when it's raining, or you can sleep out here all the time. I will get you fresh uniforms in a few days, so that you all match and everyone knows you work in the manor, he declared as the trolls gathered to inspect the barracks. Uniforms, eh? We like uniforms, especially with our name on the front. The old boss said that it was silly, since we all share the same name. But I want name tags, the largest of the trolls declared. No problem. I will have them put your names on them. Do the goats have a house? One of the Larrys asked. In the barn. The door is usually open, but the blink hat can open and close it if there is a storm coming. It lives in the loft. That was enough to satisfy them, so Dominic changed his focus to forming a training regimen that would turn town guards into ducal estate elite soldiers. Within the limits of their abilities, that was. Just standing around looking intimidating was good, but he fully expected that there would be more attacks on the duchy soon, and they would need the trolls to be in top fighting form. Chapter 433. Trolls Love Tea. The first order of business the next morning was to check on the town, to make sure that everyone managed to get settled in well enough, without supervision. I will check on the town, you check the farms, Alexis suggested, looking at the map of new arrivals. They had heavily favored farm life, even though they hadn't brought much farming equipment with them. Perhaps they had never had much, but Dominic strongly suspected that many of them were not farmers to begin with, and had simply taken the chance to upgrade. That was within their rights, as far as he was concerned. When you were offered something good, you took what you could handle to give yourself the best shot in the future. Anything less would be doing your family a disservice. Alright, I will go check on them. The farmhouses are mostly complete, but I can help them meet the neighbors as well. A bit of friendly meet and greet will help them get everything in order before the rains get bad. It already looks like it might rain again this afternoon, and some of them are likely to need encouragement to go out and start getting what they can out of the fields. Fortunately, with the majority already harvested, they can likely pay off some of the neighbor boys to help them get it in under cover. Dominic agreed. He stepped outside, and immediately, a pair of trolls came running to meet him. Big boss man, where are we going? Are we going to see friends?
The troll asked.
We are. We're going to make sure that your friends got settled into good houses and that they have what they need. I have the map, Dominic explained. The pair nodded, and then two more came running over to stand beside Alexis. What are you doing? She asked them. You smell like the boss, so we will follow you too, the troll explained, as if that was the end of the conversation. I have guards, tiny guards, and the woman with no face. The troll agreed, but showed no signs of moving. Alexis turned to Dominic for support, but he just shrugged. It's only two. They're good for heavy lifting if you need to help someone. Just let them accompany you. I will start on a training plan to get them up to your standards later. That was not the problem. She preferred not to make a spectacle of herself, and that would not be possible if she was walking around with a pair of massive mountain trolls. At that point, why not just ride a horse through town with a banner? But as she left the manor and saw that the new people all waved happily when they saw the trolls, she realized that their presence actually made her job easier. The new arrivals came out to greet the trolls, even before they knew who she was. We bring them soup when there isn't enough soup, the troll explained. You have nature magic? Alexis asked. Really good magic. Even better than the garden elf. Why do you call her that? I can introduce you later if you don't know her name, she replied. The goats call her that, so we call her that, he replied with a shrug. Who else have the goats introduced you to? The veiled maid asked. All the faceless women, Beth the cook, the lost not a goat, named Jasmine that keeps hiding in the horse shed, and Colonel Wilkes, who carries candy in his pockets. The maid laughed at the troll's rendition of how the goats saw everyone. The creatures terrorized the farrier, constantly butting into her and chasing her out of places she was trying to work. To hear that the goats thought that she was just lost and getting into things she wasn't supposed to touch made it even funnier. But to think that Colonel Wilkes, ever the professional soldier, carried candy in his pockets for the goats. The trolls knew how to get the real gossip. Are there more interesting people that we should know about? We're going to see the ones that live in town today. The maid asked, hoping to get advance warning of anyone who might be trouble. There is the cake lady. She's got 17 cats. She is interesting. Oh, and that farmer with the ox tail. He's interesting too. Strong like an ox, but shaped like a human. The troll explained. The maid smiled behind her veil. The troll obviously hadn't understood the sort of people that she was actually wanting to know about, and instead told her about the ones whose existence was memorable to the trolls. So, she asked directly, "Are there any troublemakers in the group?" The troll shook his head. "No troublemakers. The old Dave chased them all away, and then we had to move." "That would be the elder, the old human with the name Dave, right?" she asked. "Yep, that's the one. He's just over there. I can smell him." "You can smell people?" "Only upwind. You're not easy to smell. There's too much soap on you. It tickles my nose, like the lilac flowers you made it from." Alexis laughed at the interaction between the maid and the troll. Perhaps bringing him along on their trip was not a bad thing after all. Not only did the new people like him, he had exceptional senses. "The baker is a good person. I think I will like her," the other troll suddenly announced, though they were 2 blocks from the bakery. "How do you know that?" Alexis asked curiously. "She smells like sweets and only one male. Plus, everyone greets her when they walk past her shop. I can hear them." Alexis smiled, while the maid nearly choked on her tongue. The trolls could smell if you had been with someone recently? Oh, they were going to be a gossip gold mine around the manor. How could they not be, when they were so sweet and simple, but could tell instantly if someone had been sleeping around or having an affair? Chapter 434. Dave likes to help. While Alexis and her maids collected gossip from the trolls who had gone with them, Dominic gathered information of a different sort. "So, are there any of the farmers that might not be able to take care of themselves?" he asked the group of trolls who had come with him. Once they had heard that he was going to see the farmers, they sent 20 trolls with him, 2 as bodyguards, and then 18 more to help with things. Initially, they were all going to go, but with 2 accompanying Alexis and her royal guards out of the manor, they felt that the building needed more guards, so they had 10 trolls on patrol of the walls and a few others sleeping or cooking. Their nature magic was on an entirely different level. While Millie could grow crops in a matter of days, the trolls could do it in minutes. Of course, that used an enormous amount of energy, but they recovered much more quickly than the elf, as long as they had dinner ready. Dominic had learned that there were only 2 meals in a troll's day. One was breakfast, the first meal after they woke up. Then everything else they ate during the day was considered dinner. "There is a family over here that has too many small children, and the father has a bad leg. They always need help, even if they don't ask," one of the trolls suggested, pointing off into the distance. "Then we will start over there. I see that they've got the kids out in the field picking vegetables. They might need help with that." Dominic agreed. The trolls laughed and nodded in agreement. "We're really good at picking turnips and potatoes," the one who had recommended the destination declared. "Oh," the trolls nodded eagerly. "We will show you when we get there." Nobody picks potatoes as well as a mountain troll. They were stout, with short legs and long arms, with biceps nearly the size of an ale keg. But that didn't necessarily mean that they were good at farming. Just that they wouldn't be defeated by hard ground. The kids waved as the trolls came over, and 3 of the brutes ran ahead of the group. "We're here to help pick potatoes." The kids laughed. "There are so many. There are carrots and onions too." The trolls nodded, then did something that Dominic had never expected. They simply leaned forward and plunged their fingers into the dirt, then walked forward. The potatoes were uprooted by the handful, and the trolls just let them drop into rows for the kids to throw into baskets. Within a minute, they had hundreds of kilos of potatoes dug up, and they were starting on rows of other root vegetables. You weren't kidding. Trolls pick potatoes even better than tractors. Dominic commended them. The troll beside him thumped his chest. We're mountain trolls. We're good at everything. Cutter, the aging hunting dog who lived at the manor, came out to join them, sniffing the new kids carefully before trotting over to Dominic. Do you speak dog? One of the kids asked. Dominic shook his head. No, but I am pretty good at guessing. Oh, that's a shame. I can speak cat, and the Dave trolls can all speak goat. But I don't know anyone who speaks with dogs. That's sad. Dominic sniffed the air and realized that the kids did smell like blink cat or something similar. So they must be part of the population that the elder had informed him about. To speak the language of their magical beast ancestor was extremely rare, but not completely unheard of. Normally, it was the ogre or troll descendants that could innately speak the language of their ancestors, though. The father of the family came out, and Dominic saw that his leg was more than just bad. It was amputated at the hip and replaced with a crude wooden prosthetic. It didn't fit well, and it was simply strapped to the outside of his hip, which gave him an odd gait. Without the ability to bend at the knee, he couldn't easily do ground-level work without kneeling, so he would struggle with picking crops. However, he might be all right at driving a tractor. Once it came time to plant new crops, Dominic would have someone check. If he did the driving for others in exchange for help with the parts he struggled with, it could work out well for everyone. But he would figure that out on his own. Duke Wistover, thank you for having us. This house is wonderful. Shame that it was abandoned, but they left us everything that we could possibly need.
He welcomed them.
Did you have any questions about the amenities? Do you know how to turn the water on? It's obvious that there should be running water, but there is no water in the cistern, and it doesn't feed off the roof. Dominic nodded. It's likely fed off the well, then. Do you have a basement? The farmer shook his head, and Dominic was about to move when a woman's happy scream came from inside. Over the roof of the house, Dominic saw a trollish hand extend a thumbs-up gesture, and he began to laugh. It's definitely a Magitech cistern, and well pump. Just go ask the Dave and he will tell you how to turn it on and keep it charged. I would ask to greet your wife, but I suspect that she's currently soaked. A dripping elven woman stepped outside, wiping water from her face. She stopped to hug the troll who had fixed the water, then came to greet Dominic. Your Grace, welcome. I see you brought Dave to rescue us. Sorry for the imposition. Not a problem at all. We're making a loop of the farms to ensure that everyone is getting along well. I would say that the controls for your water cistern are outside, but if you have more questions, I'm here to answer them. We sent the boys into town to get canning jars this morning. The neighbor said that there are lots for sale, so we will make soup tonight, now that Dave has dug up the garden for us. The trolls nodded happily, and then one of them cast a spell that caused plants around the house to grow shoulder-high in only a few seconds. Soup with lots of dill. She amended. Chapter 435. Trolls at Work. Watching the trolls work was quite the spectacle. Mountain trolls didn't just specialize in nature magic, they were highly skilled in earth magic as well, and once they got started, they could clear a 5-meter-wide swathe of vegetables without damaging any of the crops that they dug up as they walked. The kids couldn't even pick them up as fast as the trolls dug up the garden. But they gave up when it came to the corn. Their huge fingers had a much harder time picking ears of corn off the stalks. Besides, it wasn't really necessary, as they had done the vast majority of the work already, and the farm would be in good shape for months once they had processed what was gathered today. All right, we're off to the next house. Do try to make friends with those who got here before you. Life on the farm is hard, but it's harder when you don't work together. Dominic informed the new arrivals. Of course, Your Grace. We are certain that we will be good friends. Dominic led the trolls around to the other farms, letting everyone meet the new guards of the manor grounds. Most of them didn't need anything in particular, but everyone was happy to meet the lovable giants, and the trolls were free with their magic, charging home mana crystals, increasing growth rates on gardens, and even helping one farmer plant a windrow to stop the storms from breaking off his corn stalks. There were a few cases where the houses needed repairs, and the trolls helped with that as well. They didn't even need a spell gem for it. Their affinity for earth magic let them use the repair item spell on stone houses and slate roofing. They did snack constantly as they walked, a side effect of heavy magic use, but it was a small price to pay to make so many new friends among the farmers. As an added bonus, everyone recognized them as Dominic's personal guards within seconds of seeing them. News spreads fast in a small town, and they were hard to miss. But their helpfulness was making them much more than just noble guards. Especially when they got to John's sheep farm, and the former royal assassin gave them permission to visit the flock before they moved on. Your Grace, I have some news for you. My sources say that Kaizen is preparing to make a move. He knows that he's going to lose Dagos entirely soon, and it's making him desperate. I have conflicting reports saying that he might either flee to Shersdonia, where he has many supporters among the mage sects, or he might bring his remaining forces here to finish what his family failed to the first time. It's not a sure thing, but I thought that it was worth warning you. He explained quietly, so he didn't alarm the trolls. Dominic nodded. I believe that he might send one of his clones here, with a force. I don't think that he will have the guts to come here in person. Do you have any word on who might be helping him do that? Most likely the Ormstead sect from Shersdonia. They are known to have the spell in their repertoire, and the guards in Skipple have reported seeing their people at the siege. They retreated before our battle with the monsters, but I don't believe that they've withdrawn support for Kaizen. Dominic nodded. I will keep it in mind. Have you heard anything else? Nothing of imminent severity. I have heard a few things about the plans to deploy the princes and their armies, but that doesn't directly involve us, as they're not headed for Stantia province at all. The threat here is considered to be mostly controlled, and they're more concerned with liberating the cities that had been under siege. There is one odd fact that I thought you might want to know, though. It is raining from Staptenden all the way to Albrols. Dagos hasn't seen that much rain in years. So, there's a chance that the drought is beginning to end, and they might be returning to more average rainfall for the area from a long-term standpoint. That is wonderful news. If they start getting decent rainfall again, it will solve some of the famine issues, and Dagos will begin to stabilize. Well, a little anyhow. Almost all the people are gone from the eastern regions already. John nodded. It might be too little, too late. But if it gives them enough of a crop to stabilize the cities, it's enough that it will reduce the risk of the civil war spreading even more than it currently has. Hungry people are desperate people, and that's what Kaizen has been relying on to recruit. Their last stop of the loop was to visit the Witch Coven. It wasn't intentional, there just weren't any more occupied houses between there and the manor. The coven was expecting them, as mountain trolls are not subtle, especially when they're excited about things, and the smell of whatever the witches were making had them extra excited. Naturally, the answer was soup. Ladies, I just wanted to make sure that you had all that you needed. This is Dave, and the trolls will be my manor guards in the future. They're happy to help if you need anything. Dominic greeted Betty, the only one of the coven who could pass as human. The others would surely be listening in, as he didn't smell or sense any potions being brewed at the moment, only dinner. Thank you. We've been doing quite well. The armies have become quite fond of our potions, and we've been able to buy all sorts of ingredients since they arrived. I must say, I didn't expect them to need the same things every time, but perhaps they are slow learners. She replied with a deep sigh. Did you go through the camp followers and treat them as well? If not, the soldiers will just keep catching it. Dominic asked. The trolls laughed at the remark, and Betty giggled. Actually, we sorted that sort of thing out the first week. But somehow they keep getting trench foot, despite there not being any trenches and various maladies from impure water and bad food, though the market delivers fresh to the kitchens every day. It's most likely their attempts to make bootleg liquor. I will talk to the guilds to get them something that's not going to rot their guts. Dominic suggested. Much appreciated. Other than that, we're doing very well. We do have some sisters coming soon as well. It might be a few more weeks before they get here, but we will tell you when they're looking for a house. There isn't much in the woods, but they're garden witches. They can pass as regular travelers. All right, I will watch for them. There might be a few more in this batch as well. I didn't check closely. Chapter 436. Keep your trolls. The trolls nodded happily. There are witches in our group. Not as cute as the garden elf or as strong. We visited some of them today. Betty smiled. I suppose Dominic wouldn't be looking for magic or prying into anyone's personal business. But it's good to know that there are at least a few who can make potions. The troll looked confused. Not potion witches. Sparkly stick witches. Oh, techno witches. That makes sense then. Those will also be helpful around town, as they can fix things that others think are not fixable. The troll smiled at her. Yep. They fix all the things. We're Dave, and you can call us when you need to move heavy things. I saw you by the soldiers today, with a heavy wagon. I will let the others know. Oh, before we go, if your coven leader knows a spell similar to Be Swarm, but with locusts or something similar, I would be interested in purchasing a spell gem from her. Dominic added. The witch looked confused. What would you even need that for? Combat, of course. Having bees is good, but having locusts would work too. Betty smiled. I will let her know. And warn you not to forget that the spell can also be used to pollinate the crops. If there aren't enough natural bees in the area, you can supplement them to get the crops growing well. Dominic had known that the spell had a valid and practical purpose. He had assumed that it was there simply to harass trespassers with a swarm of bees. Somehow, that made it less fun. Alexis and her group were back before Dominic and his group returned to the house. They had gathered all the information that they needed, and they had an even more extensive list for the residential map than Dominic did. All his stops had been farms, so it was just a list of population and location that he had made. As they had said when they arrived, they didn't have any special trades that they wished to share. Though, he likely should have asked if there were magicians in the family, as the trolls had said there were techno witches on the farms. Good, you're back. Now, we can talk about how you plan to teach 50 trolls who can barely read their own name to be ducal guards. Alexis declared the moment that Dominic was back inside. Well, they're pretty good at memorizing rules, and they figured out patrol routes for the wall all on their own. I'm thinking that they're halfway there. They might never be elite swordsmen, but they can beat a hobgoblin to death with their bare fists. My thought is that I should give them a rulebook, a uniform, and some new clubs. Once they have that much, they'll be able to figure it out from there. Dominic suggested. You do know that the Ducal Guard is supposed to do things like welcome guests, protect them in public, and attend formal events, right? She countered. So, we can keep a few who are not trolls. I still think that 50 mountain trolls is the best defensive force that we could have hired to defend the manor itself. Plus, you said welcoming guests. They love welcoming guests. The maids giggled quietly. Yes, the trolls did love welcoming guests and strangers and everyone else. Colonel Wilkes cleared his throat to get their attention. You know, they can be taught formal rituals, right? They're not as dumb as they sound when they are speaking. Once you've taught them something or given them instructions, they will follow them perfectly nearly every time. I went to check on them earlier and talked to their mother for a while. She knows their limitations, and she is confident that they can do the job. The only warning that she had was that you can't ask them to let people bully them. If someone insults them enough, they'll just squish them. See, perfect. Dominic agreed. The maid shrugged.
He's got a point.
You can't fault a mountain troll for doing what comes naturally, and if someone is dumb enough to upset an armed troll that size, the world is better off without them. Alexis pinched the bridge of her nose. You know what? I'm going to go talk to the mages and have them send someone over to train the trolls. If anyone can do it, it's them. Then, they can send over a few handlers to do the formal parts that aren't possible for a 3-meter-tall troll. I knew that this would all work out in the end. It's not such a big deal. Besides, they're great defenders. They can use earth and nature magic so they can make boulders to throw at attackers. That's got to be nearly as good as extra cannons. Dominic added. Alexis relented with a smile. Fine, keep your trolls. I've already ordered them new uniforms from the tailors anyhow. You can take care of the rest of their equipment. Does it have name tags? Dave wanted name tags. Alexis rolled her eyes at him. Oh, I am well aware of Dave's desire to have name tags on the shirts, and that the ones for the cooks need to be stain-resistant, and that the cooks are Larry, not Dave, and that they can speak to goats. Sheep too, apparently. They were quite fond of the flock. But don't forget that they like soup. That's a very important fact. Dominic agreed. The maids laughed at his serious response, and the way that one of the trolls stuck his head in the open door at the mention of the word soup. He retreated to his post just outside the porch when he realized that the people weren't discussing dinner, and Dominic winked at Alexis. "See, it's the magic word." "All right, I believe you. Now, you should catch up on the duchy's paperwork. Your desk is a disaster zone, and that's with me doing the majority of it for you." Alexis chided him. "Right, paperwork. I forgot that it won't go away just by ignoring it." Chapter 437. Alarm sounded. Despite the many issues that Alexis had anticipated would come from having 50 massive trolls living in the yard, the next week had been quite pleasant. They trained first thing in the morning, alongside the veiled maids and the royal guards. They helped Millie with the gardens, and they patrolled the walls, waving happily every time someone walked close enough to talk to them. If the goal was to intimidate anyone, they were failing miserably. But as far as their actual duties, they had turned out to be brilliant. So Dominic was shocked into nearly smashing his fingers when he heard a siren-like wailing coming from the whale just after lunch that day. It was loud, continuous, and not like any other alarm that they had. He ran out of the forge with Amy right behind him, the shields that they had been making instantly forgotten. Alexis' royal guards had their shields now, as did Prince George, but they had just received another batch of Magitech orbs from the Duskblade sect to make them for the departed Signia princes. One of the trolls was screaming in the northern corner of the fortification as Dominic ran up the stairs onto the ramparts. And what he saw was pandemonium. Portals had opened all over the area, and the armies from both Westover and Axbridge were under attack by monsters, while the farmers were either running for their lives toward the manor or joining the army ranks to fight back. "Trolls. I need half of you on the wall to defend the people coming here, the other half for me, and we're going to fight," he shouted. The trolls were already on their way, but a glow in the distance caught Dominic's attention. One of the barony manors had lit its emergency beacon. The monsters weren't only coming to Westover from one direction. Change of plans. 10 trolls on the walls with Amy, 20 Daves to help the armies here, and 20 with me to help the people far away. Alexis skidded to a stop beside him. "What is happening?" "Other than the obvious. There is an attack at the baronies. We need to spread out the forces. We're being attacked from all directions. I will inform Fahad's men as I pass by. The town guard has already deployed. I can see the sheriff marshalling people in town as well. I am taking trolls to the baronies. If I recall policy right, the royal guard is to remain inside the walls with you and the nobles." Alexis nodded. "That is right. Our priority is the diplomats. Did you hear anything from the ritual in the barrier?" Dominic shook his head.
No.
The radio was on in my office, but there was no news from them in the last few hours. The last report of trouble that we got was when the airships had spotted a small group of ogres this morning. "The flare is Baron Billy Bob," one of the trolls declared. Dominic smiled as the troll used the former soldier's nickname. The former captain from the Natural Sons Regiment was a good man and a good fighter, but he didn't have more than a handful of armed men. "We need to go. Stay safe, and adjust the deployment as needed. They know the commands." With that, Dominic was off and running, accompanied by 20 of the trolls, while 20 more slid down the outside of the wall to save time, headed for the nearest fight. A middle-aged woman ran up to them as they passed by the edge of town, and Dominic waved for her to keep up if she wanted to talk. "I'm a cleric of the dragon gods. I can heal. I saw the emergency flare from the barony," she explained.
Got it.
"Dave, give her a lift. She can't run as fast as we do." The priestess grumbled as she was unceremoniously thrown over a troll's shoulder, but Dave didn't hold her there and let her turn in his grasp to sit more comfortably on his hip with her legs around his waist. "We're turning right," the troll carrying the priestess announced suddenly. Dominic didn't know why, but he followed the charge as they made for the farms. The farmers could protect themselves or run for town where the soldiers were. But the trolls were insistent. Then he heard it. The bleating of panicked sheep. There was a horde of minotaurs attacking John's farm, which currently had only the former king's man to defend the flock. "2 of you need to go to the Baron. Defend his family while we rescue the sheep," Dominic shouted. There was no time to delay if they expected to save the barony, but the trolls were already in combat, and it would be harder to break free with a large group now that they had found the Minotaurs. Dominic hefted his new shield, one intended to go to the royal guard, and bombarded the creatures with arcane blasts as he ran into combat. A returning bombardment of firebolt spells hit his barrier, and Dominic heard the trolls swearing. Fire was one of the few things that could seriously injure them. To his right, in the back of the horde, a group of young mages was casting fire spells at the farm buildings with evil smiles while John fought desperately to buy time against the Minotaurs. The trolls had been given all the basic Signia-issued spells, and they had area barrier up. But they hadn't been able to level it fully. It was only level 2 or 3. So, it helped, but they had to keep putting it back up after it was hit. He would ensure they fixed that after this fight. Dominic turned his attention to the mages, and 3 dropped in only a few seconds as his magic tore through their defenses. Acolytes. This group of Minotaurs was supported by students in unfamiliar robes, and they were completely helpless against Dominic's attacks when upcast by the shield. Chapter 438. Save the Flock. The flames on his sword flashed as Dominic cut through a Minotaur, freeing John from combat and clearing a line of sight to the mages. "Where is your wife?" he asked. The king's man tilted his chin toward town.
"In shopping." "Perfect."
That meant the only losses here would be the farm buildings and some sheep. "I've got the Minotaurs, you can work." John nodded, then ducked low into the long grass and vanished. The mages were still hitting Dominic with spells, as his flaming shield and the fireball he cast into their midst had all their attention. But a few seconds later, the back ranks began to fall as the assassin cleaved his way through their ranks with a blade in either hand. They were just students. No matter how corrupted their education had been, they couldn't even defend themselves when they didn't have the Minotaurs on their side. With the mages eliminated, John fought his way back to Dominic's side. "What brings you here first?" "You're on the way to Baron Billy Bob's." He sent up a flare, and the trolls heard your sheep panic. John smiled. "Good bunch, they are." The trolls were bigger and stronger than the Minotaurs, and their new spiked clubs were devastating. They weighed more than Dominic did, but the trolls had no issue swinging them like a baton. Minotaurs were sent flying, and lightning crackled through the monsters as the trolls used their new magic orbs to add damage to their attacks. "You need to upgrade that." John sighed as he realized the situation. "We didn't get to it before the fight. I will do it after, now that the trolls have monster cores available."
"Boys,
use the monster cores to upgrade your barrier and attack spells," he added, shouting so all the trolls heard him. They could use them as they went, instead of saving them until the end of the fight. With the magic controlling them gone, the Minotaurs began to flee. Boulders chased them, hurled by the irate trolls. But dozens still escaped the fight. "Check the sheep quickly, we need to save more. Baron Billy Bob has goats too," Dominic informed them. The closest troll gave him a thumbs up as he kicked corpses, collecting small monster cores in his fingers to feed his lightning bolt spell gem. Dominic would make them shields after the battle as well. They were going to have earned them, the way this fight was going. 50 mountain trolls with huge tower shields marching through enemy lines would absolutely crush anything that Dagos could throw at them. Plus, they would be a mobile fortification for troops behind them. "Boss, they're too far," Dave shouted. Dominic took a knee and used his shield to support his rifle as he picked off the fleeing Minotaurs. "Got them. Go save the Baron and his goats." The priestess was scooped up again, and the trolls were off at a run, leaving John and Dominic to catch up. They certainly have odd priorities. John laughed as they ran. "Everyone gets motivated in their own way. But they speak goat, so I suppose it's no different from running to where the civilians are screaming." John looked back at his farm, and Dominic patted him on the shoulder. "Stay and clean up the mess. Just watch for more troops. We're not so hard up that we need to let your farm burn." John clapped him on the shoulder and turned back to his home. The main house was fine, but there was damage to the granary, some of the fields were still burning, and the barn was in flames. He had the magic to sort it all out, but the barn was isolated by gravel, so the flames wouldn't spread. Dominic chased the trolls through fields, past farmers who were retreating from the threat of monsters, or grouping up with neighbors for defense. But he knew from experience that the monsters would head for the tactical targets first, so it would be the barony house that got the majority of the attack, while the farms would be targeted for being too close to where the monsters were walking. There were militiamen among the ranks and some of the town guard as well. Not enough to ensure safety for the farmers, even the few who had remained with weapons, but enough that they stood a fighting chance against weaker monsters. As before, Dominic could see hordes of goblins in the distance, led by hobgoblins. Whether it was intentional or a result of the lower level of the summoners, he didn't know. But the militia and former soldiers among the farmers could likely handle smaller groups of them. A hobgoblin was sent flying as the first of Dominic's group reached the horde besieging the barony. However, he didn't see the two that he had sent in advance. "Fight here, I will go find Billy Bob," he instructed, turning for the house. The former captain and two of his men were fighting at the front door, with Billy Bob firing out a window using a mana revolver. "Your Grace, you're a sight for sore eyes," he shouted as Dominic detonated a fireball in the crowd of goblins. "Did you see two trolls arrive before my group?" he asked. "They're up the hill. I was working the field when they arrived, and they followed the goats to Baron Keith's place. It's under attack by gnolls," he explained. The other baron had a very large family and more weapons, so they would be in a better situation, Dominic assumed. But they could have received a larger attacking force. "I've got more on the other side of the house. They're clearing out the fields now. You defend the civilians in the house. I will look for the mages summoning them." The repeated blasting of the pistol and the shouts of goblins were his only reply as Dominic rushed to clear the largest groups with fireball spells before they could spread out. The hobgoblins were already gathering to fight the trolls, but there was no sign of mages yet. Hopefully, he would find them soon. The more that he could eliminate early, the better. Chapter 439. Hunting Tactics. Dominic tried to stay out of sight so he could hunt the mages, but he wasn't seeing any magic being hurled at the trolls. Either the mages weren't here, or they had gotten smart and ran away when the trolls arrived. Dominic climbed a tree to get a better view and saw the issue. The portals that had sent the goblins here were all near Baron Keith's place, and a larger group of mages had gathered there. It was 600 meters from where he was fighting, but he had a solution for that. Setting a mortar launcher in a tree was not optimal, so Dominic knew that he would be firing blind. However, he had enough experience with the weapon that he knew he could adjust the rounds to drop within 50 meters of his intended target. One after another, Dominic tossed mortars in the tube. It was nearly 5 seconds of flight time, and 10 mortars in the air by the time that the first exploded. Dominic jumped back up into the tree to scout his target, and then dropped to adjust his tube and continue. Chaos reigned among the mages as they tried to understand what was attacking them. They couldn't see Dominic beside the tree in the distance, and there were no airships overhead close enough to target them. There were plenty in the air, supporting the armies, but none paying attention to this remote barony. The mortars didn't break barriers most of the time, but they made the mages focus on keeping the barriers active and destroy their camp supplies, which had arrived in a wagon. It was also exhausting to continually defend against artillery, and they breathed a sigh of relief a few minutes later when Dominic stopped shelling them. But he had only climbed the tree so he could shoot. He wasn't a sniper, and that was a long shot, but the mages had gathered for safety, and even if he missed a kill shot, he could break barriers and severely injure them with every rifle shot. Imbuing the rounds with fireball let them shatter the barrier, then explode in the groups of mages, and the death toll rapidly grew. Then, someone finally calculated the direction that the attack was coming from, and an army of gnolls began to run in his direction. They were just in time. The trolls had nearly finished with the hobgoblins, and they were coming his way, drawn by the magic of the rifle reloading. A mournful wail split the air in the distance, and the trolls began to run, charging into the gnolls, with their clubs flailing. Bodies flew everywhere as the trolls ignored tactics to get to the sound of the call. Dominic couldn't tell what had happened. He could see both trolls at the manor still standing, but they must have taken a loss, as they were still heavily besieged. The advance of the trolls confused the mages, but Dominic didn't stop shooting, and they couldn't do anything to stop the carnage of rampaging mountain trolls. There was a very good reason that the human nation had been terrified of the Dragon Kings working with the trolls in combat, and this was why. They simply healed too fast, and with the magic of the dragons, they were even more terrifying. The lightning bolts that had been ineffectual against minotaurs were enough to cripple a gnoll, and with a spell cast on a spiked club, even a glancing blow would shatter bone and burn muscle tissue. Dominic saw a group of mages frantically gesturing through the portals as he eliminated their support, then the dejected look when they realized they weren't getting the support they had been begging for. Instead, a group of 10 ogres came through, then the portals were closed from the other side, leaving the mages here trapped. They must have learned their lesson. Dominic muttered to himself as he realized what they had done. If they cut off the portals before the location was overrun, they didn't have to risk him hurling mortars through this time. That had worked beautifully last time, but it wasn't a trick that they would allow him to just use with impunity. He would have to use stealth. The last of the mages in this group fell to his rifle, and Dominic moved to collect the monster cores from the gnolls, and to finish off the wounded monsters that the trolls had left in their wake. Pistols did the job efficiently as he ran through the carnage, but the work needed to tap all the bodies for loot greatly slowed his progress. So, Dominic made a detour. The trolls would do their best to save the Baron, and they had the priestess with them. Instead, he made his way to the mage's location and searched the bodies for storage items and valuables. There was no reason to let the enemy recover their belongings after the battle, even if he couldn't open the storage rings without help from the Duskblade sect. "Let me." A familiar voice came from behind him as Amy made her way through the grass, covered in blood. "What happened to you? I thought that you were at the manor." The little mage nodded. "I was. But Alexis needed a runner. We need the trolls back. There are too many mages and monsters coming from the other side of town. The attacks on the barons were just a distraction. And I fell for it.
Damn it.
How are the other Daves doing?" Amy smiled. "They're still fighting with the army. Someone made them a stack of metal plates, and they're setting up forward bulwarks by pounding them into the ground. Well, that was one way to use trolls. Follow me and loot the bodies. We will let the Baron know we're leaving." I got the mages here, and the portals close. With 2 of them, the process was much faster, but they were only getting what was close, and Baron Keith could send someone for the rest.
Trolls.
"How is the battle?" Dominic shouted as he approached the hill that the barony house was built on. "Clear." The scene in the yard was grim, with a dozen wounded soldiers and an exhausted priestess slumped down against the well. "Baron."
Good to see you.
This side was the diversion. "We're being recalled to the battle at the manor. However, I will leave you and Baron William a few trolls each to help defend, in case the monsters return." The Baron shook his head. "We will be fine after a bit."
The priestess saw to that.
"Take your men to war." Chapter 440. Rescued Barons. Dominic shook the Baron's hand, then looked for the source of the mournful cry that had called his trolls together. Near the house, 2 bodies lay under white sheets, while an old woman sat nearby, crying. The Baron had brought his whole extended family, so that would likely be his mother and 2 lost members of his direct family, or his wife's family. "Priestess, are you able to move? Or do you need to rest?" he asked. "I need at least an hour, unless Dave is going to carry me. It doesn't look like much now, but I pulled a dozen men from the brink of death." She replied, barely more than a whisper. 2 trolls will stay with the priestess for her security. That should be enough to see her safely back home once she can move. If you've got food ready, they'll need it. Magic use on that level is brutal on the energy levels. "I'm sure that we can put a pot of stew on?" The comment was phrased as a question, but the trolls chosen to stay behind celebrated while the others sighed in resignation. The trolls are vegetarian, so it's not a problem if you just throw on something simple. Dominic noted. "Oh, that is a relief. With an appetite like that, I don't think we'd have enough meat to make them happy." The Baron's wife replied as she sent staff back inside to warn the kitchen staff. The trolls wouldn't let her work alone, though. The pair elected to remain immediately went to the garden and ripened enough produce for the meal, and brought it to the kitchen window. If someone was cooking for them, the least they could do was bring the ingredients. Dominic gestured to another pair of trolls. "Go to the other barony house, and keep the area secure." The farmers will all be going there for safety, and they'll need you. The rest of you are with me, and we're headed back to join the others." The Baron shook his head as Dominic left. He had separated 4 of his trolls for their defense, but there wasn't much left to fight in the area, and they had spears to arm militia for that. The extra fighters would be a blessing if another portal opened, but there were thousands of people in town, not counting the farms, and under 200 combined between the 2 baronies. The trolls were surprisingly fast when they were running, and Dominic knew just where to send them. The majority of the portals had opened on the east side of the river, so they weren't separated from Westover by the river, so he could circle the attack and hit from the side. He already knew what he could do with Amy at his side, and now he had 16 mountain trolls as well. The first targets they were going to reach were bugbears, brutish creatures that turned out to be absolutely terrified of trolls. The moment that the mountain trolls charged into combat, the creatures began to apologize and run away. Amy and Dominic fired their pistols as fast as they could and had the trolls herd the bugbears toward a group of ogres. Those would be one of the bigger threats to the town, so they needed to be eliminated. There were no portals in this area, and it was becoming clear that the mages had very loose control of their monsters. They were following directions, but they weren't mindlessly attacking. The soldiers and airships have been targeting the mages as much as they can. I think they don't have enough of them left here to control the monsters. Amy explained over the sound of pistols firing.
Perfect.
The less organized they are, the easier this gets. Trolls, focus on the ogres. We will deal with the cowards. Each pistol shot dropped a bugbear. Some were dead, some were just heavily injured, but to Dominic it didn't matter. They would go back through and finish them later. What mattered was that the numbers were shifting, and there were fewer ogres than there were trolls in his group. One-on-one, they were somewhat evenly matched, but the ogres really didn't stand much of a chance, as the trolls could heal so quickly. However, their arrival had triggered a chain response, and monsters that had been headed for the defenders near the town limits turned back to defend against the ambush. "Oh, we're going to be rich." Amy laughed as she saw the horde of goblins headed their way. "We're already rich. We're going to be out of storage space, is what we're going to be." Amy laughed and handed him a bag. "I grabbed this from the sect earlier. It's got enough storage space that you can just load it up and sort it out later. Just stuff it in your coat pocket, and it should be usable." That was good enough for Dominic. He had needed a new bag of storage for some time with all these monster attacks. The 2 of them with a pair of revolvers each was as devastating as he remembered from the last battle, but the number of monsters coming their way from the main battle was about to become overwhelming. Switching to Fireball blasted holes in the goblin horde, but even with his increased casting speed, it was far from enough to hold them off. Dominic spared a few shots to take down an ogre, giving the trolls more of an advantage, and then focused on the tide of goblins. Amy was at his side, and between the 2 of them, they had enough firepower to nearly stall the front lines of the horde. However, they were coming from every direction but the back, and that could change at any minute if the mages realized that there was a major threat on this side of the battle. "Artillery?" Amy asked. "Artillery." Dominic grabbed a mortar round and lit the fuse on his horn. The confused look on the goblins' faces as the oblong object flew at them was priceless, but Dominic didn't wait and continued to hurl more explosives at them, rocking the area with shockwaves.